there is increasing evidence that Israel has indeed successfully struck Iran's nuclear facility, and there is significant damage there. Tehran is withdrawing from nuclear negotiations with the United States of America and is increasingly stating that it is truly ready to develop nuclear weapons, because supposedly this is the only thing that can destroy Israel. Yesterday, there were calls on the streets of Tehran for Ali Khamenei to hurry up and create nuclear weapons in order to strike Israel with them. In this episode, we will discuss exactly this incident of the destruction of Iran's nuclear facility by Israel. And we will go over the entire chronology of what is happening between Iran and Israel in this phase of the war. But most importantly, we will track what has happened over the past 2 days and highlight key points regarding the attacks specifically on Iran's nuclear facilities. I'm Aleksei Pechiy. It's June 14th. Let's go through this systematically. But before we begin, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, give it a like, and leave any comment you wish. Also subscribe to my Telegram channel. The link to it is in the description of this video. There we publish breaking news as it comes in. Let's break everything down. Israel launched a wave of unprecedented strikes on Iran shortly before sunrise on Friday morning, hitting key sites of the country's nuclear program as well as residential areas in prestigious districts of Tehran, in killing some of the country's high-ranking military leaders. Well, here I've already managed to analyze satellite images and dozens of videos posted on social media in order to try to understand how this large-scale operation is unfolding across Iran. Now, let's review some of the timeline. So, literally just before dawn on Friday, the first reports of explosions in Tehran came in at around 3:30 ante-meridium local time on Friday. Strikes were also carried out on a nuclear facility in Natanz, which is about 250 kilometers south of Tehran. By 4 ante-meridium, information appeared that the Israel Defense Forces announced they had used aircraft to strike dozens of military targets, including nuclear facilities in various regions of Iran. The statement was made at 3:44 ante-meridium Israeli time, which is 30 minutes behind the Iranian time zone, at 4:35 on Friday. Minutes later, United States Secretary of State Marco Rubio stressed that the United States was not involved in Israel's unilateral strikes. At 5:17 ante-meridium, Netanyahu made a televised address, stating that Israel acted to repel the Iranian threat to Israel's very survival. He said that the operation would continue as long as necessary to eliminate all threats. Netanyahu stated that Iran had produced enough highly enriched uranium for 9 nuclear warheads. Here is his quote: "Iran can produce nuclear weapons in a very short time. It could be a year, it could be within a few months. This is a clear and real danger to the survival of Israel." Already in the morning, Israeli military announced that they had killed 3 of the highest-ranking people in the Iranian army and its nuclear program. Although the strikes on Friday seemed extremely targeted, there were also reports of civilian casualties. The Israel Defense Forces announced on Friday at 9 ante-meridium that Iran launched over 100 drones towards Israel, and Israeli air defense was preparing to intercept them. Around noon, Iranian media began reporting that Israel had carried out a new strike on the northwestern city of Tabriz, and that the Tabriz airport had come under a massive Israeli attack. Overall, after decades of threats, Israel on Friday launched a truly daring attack on Iran, targeting its nuclear facilities, scientists, and military leaders. But international assessments, including those of the United States intelligence community, say that Iran's nuclear program is currently not a weapons program. Tehran has also repeatedly insisted that it is not building a bomb. But after that, International Atomic Energy Agency reports appear, indicating that they are indeed preparing to develop nuclear weapons. And of course, it's not a lie or falsehood to say that they don't have nuclear weapons right now, but it's also absolutely true that these weapons could appear at any moment. Well, let's take a closer look at this nuclear program before we move on to the evidence that there really was a strike on a nuclear facility, and a rather serious one at that. And in general, how did Iran's nuclear program even come about? Let's call it peaceful for now. The thing is, the United States launched a nuclear program with Iran in 1957. At that time, Iran was ruled by a pro-Western monarch, the Shah, and the 2 countries were still friends. By the way, Israel and Iran were also very close friends, with good relations, and at that time nothing foreshadowed any trouble. With the support of the United States of America, Iran began developing its nuclear energy program in the 1970s. But the United States stopped its support when the Shah was overthrown during the Islamic Revolution in 1979, after the revolution that turned Iran into an Islamic republic. Western countries were concerned that the country might use its nuclear program to produce atomic weapons using highly enriched uranium. That's why there's always so much focus on uranium enrichment and why these negotiations have taken so long. Tehran claims that it is not seeking to develop nuclear weapons. It is a participant in the United Nations Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, under which it has committed not to develop a nuclear bomb. Iran has spent decades developing its nuclear program and sees it as a source of national pride and sovereignty. Iran claims that the program is intended solely for peaceful energy purposes, and it plans to build additional nuclear power plants to meet domestic energy needs and free up more oil for export. But then the question arises, why enrich uranium? Why enrich and store it? And most importantly, why hide nuclear facilities deep underground? If this is an absolutely peaceful program, then why does Iran so often not allow International Atomic Energy Agency inspectors who could come, check, and confirm that yes, there are no issues, it's an absolutely peaceful program, everything is clean, everything is fine? Iran doesn't do that. Why is this program so controversial? The thing is, nuclear power plants require fuel called uranium. And according to the United Nations nuclear watchdog, that is the International Atomic Energy Agency, no other country in the world has this kind of uranium like Iran does without having a nuclear program. This is the key point. That is, to operate nuclear power plants, you need much less enriched uranium. And uranium like the one Iran has is only available to countries that officially possess nuclear weapons. This key point raised suspicions about Iran's transparency regarding its intentions. Tehran used its stockpiles of weapons-grade uranium as a bargaining chip in negotiations with the United States, repeatedly stating that it would get rid of it if United States-led sanctions were lifted. That is, Iran is openly saying, yes, we don't need this enriched uranium for servicing nuclear power plants. We are ready to get rid of it if the United States lifts all sanctions and so on. But in the latest rounds of negotiations, Iran suddenly said no. We will not give up our existing stockpiles of enriched uranium, and in addition, we want to continue enriching it. Here, even without understanding nuclear energy, the question arises, why? Why do you need stockpiles of enriched uranium? And why do you want to continue enriching it if, as you say, this uranium is absolutely unnecessary for maintaining a peaceful nuclear program? This kind of leads one to think that Iran is, after all, aiming to one day announce, oops, sorry, we've already created nuclear weapons. And in addition, there was already one nuclear agreement with Iran back in 2015 when sanctions were lifted from Iran. According to the 2015 nuclear agreement signed by former United States President Barack Obama and officially known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. At that time, Iran agreed to sharply limit the number of centrifuges and restrict uranium enrichment to levels significantly below those needed for weapons production in exchange for sanctions relief. But during his first term as president in 2018, Trump withdrew from the agreement, stating that, quote, "The rotten structure of the deal was not enough to prevent Iran from developing a nuclear bomb." He increased sanctions against Iran and threatened to impose sanctions on any country that helps the regime acquire nuclear weapons. During his second term, Trump renewed efforts to reach a new nuclear deal with Iran. Just hours before Israel strikes, the United States president cautioned Israel against attacking, while United States-Iran negotiations were in progress. Trump said, "For now, I think there's an agreement. I don't want them to go in because that would ruin everything." It might actually help, but it could also ruin everything. It later turned out that this was all just a diplomatic game. Trump was well aware that an attack on Iran was being prepared specifically on nuclear facilities, but publicly he had to say that he was supposedly against this attack. And then, later on, two American officials informed about the consequences of Israel's strikes on targets in Iran commented on the strike on the nuclear facility in Natanz, stating that, according to preliminary data, the strike on the nuclear facility in Natanz was effective. American officials say that it's not just about superficial damage, as the Iranian side claims, but also about consequences for the underground levels, where the centrifuges used for uranium enrichment are located. There, in particular, the electricity was cut off and most likely significant damage was caused. It is noted that Israel simultaneously carried out a cyber attack on the facility in Natanz, and accordingly, along with the cyber attack, a missile strike could have disabled this station. And later, there was a report that at the key uranium enrichment facility in Iranian Natanz, after Israel's night attacks, there was a release of radiation in the form of alpha particles. The International Atomic Energy Agency Director General, Rafael Grossi, reported this. The radiation level outside the Natanz facility remains unchanged. The type of radioactive contamination present inside the facility is mainly alpha particles, which can be controlled with appropriate protective measures. The head of the Atomic Energy Organization of Iran, Mohammad Eslami, in turn, claims that the Israeli attacks allegedly did not cause serious damage to the Natanz facility and did not result in a radiation leak. Quote, "It's good that the damage was at ground level and we didn't have any casualties." There was also no radiation leak that could have caused concern among the population. At the moment, we are assessing the damage, but as you can see, the two assessments are completely different. Iran claims nothing serious occurred. But later, photos appeared online indicating that at least some ground facilities were indeed destroyed. There was likely a penetrating strike on an underground facility as well, because the release of radiation outside suggests that, at the very least, there was some kind of breach of this facility. And finally, I'll add that obviously Israel will continue such attacks because today, the chief of the General Staff of the Israel Defense Forces, Eyal Zamir, and the Air Force Chief, Tomer Bar, stated during a situational assessment that the Israeli military intends to resume strikes on targets in the Iranian capital, Tehran. And next, I'll quote them. The Israel Defense Forces are operating according to their operational plans, and Israeli Air Force fighter jets are ready to resume strikes on targets in Tehran. So, as you understand, these attacks will continue, and Israel, even after this terrible night, is not going to stop them. And finally, I'll add that the Israeli military stated that during the strikes on Iran, 9 scientists and experts involved in Iran's nuclear program were killed. This is more than the previous figure of 6 people. The Israel Defense Forces stated that as a result of the strike on Friday, Ali Bahoy, Karimi, Mansour Asghari, and Saeed Borji were killed. They are specialists in mechanics, physics, and materials science, respectively. Their deaths have already been confirmed by the semi-official Iranian news agency Tasnim. Earlier, Israel claimed that it had killed 6 experts involved in the nuclear program, as well as 3 key military leaders. By the way, another military leader was added to this group who was also eliminated. This became known a little later. And this military leader is Amir Ali Hajizadeh. The death of this Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Air Force commander was a serious blow to Tehran because Hajizadeh was in charge of the country's missile program, which was responsible for defending the airspace and carrying out attacks abroad. He was the mastermind behind Iran's previous attack on Israel in April 2024, as well as the missile strike on the United States base in Iraq in 2020. And Amir Ali Hajizadeh was also responsible for transferring Iranian Shahed drones to the Russian side, which were later used in Ukraine. He was the one who oversaw the program of transferring Shahed drones to the Russians. He was the one who sent instructors to Russia to train Russians to operate these drones. And he is probably the one who bears the greatest responsibility for the deaths in Ukraine caused by Iranian drones. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. If you want to support the work of this channel, you can do so financially by donating through the links and details in the description of this video, or by using the quick response code on your screen. I would appreciate your support. That's all for now. Take care. Goodbye, everyone.